Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. This is part of our Tribal Entrepreneurship program to help promote and share stories regarding tribal entrepreneurship, both on and off of the reservation. Today, we have with us Mytegia Lee. Mytegia is one of our tribal liaisons. She is from Manuelito, New Mexico, and I'll let her introduce herself. But today, we're just gonna have a pretty casual chat with Mytegia, so that she can share about her experiences living on the reservation, growing up there, her own business ventures that she's had, and then the work that she's doing now regarding financial literacy, and then also as a tribal liaison with our program. So if you want to introduce yourself, Mytegia, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mytegia Lee, just as Cecilia had shared. I am a tribal liaison with UNM's Rainforest Innovations program. Aside from that, I also do executive directing for a nonprofit that goes by the name of Southwest Native Assets Coalition, where we assist individuals with financial literacy, credit counseling, home buyers education, and a slew of other services. And again, I am from the Manuelito area. I am a mother of three. I'm a silversmith, a rancher. Got of experience in quite a bit of different ventures that I've partaken in career choices, but jack of all trades, but a master at none.
Thanks, Mytegia. And just so everyone's aware, I'll be asking Mytegia questions, and then we will have an opportunity towards the end for others to either ask questions in the chat, or you can unmute to ask your questions. But for now, it'll just be Mytegia and myself. So I guess the first thing I kind of wanted to touch on is a little bit of your background, Mytegia. This Fireside Chat is called Bloom Where You're Planted. I know you have a really interesting story about how you've been able to grow and evolve from being raised on Manuelito and then growing up in your community and now serving your community. So I was just wondering if you can share a little bit with us about what it was like growing up in Manuelito, on the reservation, being raised by your grandparents. What was that like?
Well, starting off, growing up in Manuelito was a journey for me that was not basically a self-choice. It was, just coming from a large family, and being a product of a large family means that, sometimes people have to make sacrifices in order to be able to thrive in the communities and the homes that they're in. And my grandparents, they came from Manuelito, the late Buddy Lee and Louise Lee, very well known in the community down there. My grandmother, she was a rancher. She was a silversmith as well. She was the local midwife for the community. She had a lot of experience with just everyday living. And as we know, back then, there wasn't easy access to hospitals, and not everybody had a vehicle in the community and whatnot. So anytime anybody needed anything, it was kind of like a resource to just help your neighbors. And being where I'm at, we were about 3 1/4 mile back from the county road, so dirt road, a lot of rain, a lot of mud, a lot of elements around us as far as what people are used to, right? You're in city and we don't really got to worry about that. We're on a paved road. We've got electric and running water in these areas. And where I grew up, that was not the case. I grew up in a home where we didn't have the access to electric or running water. And, even being able to get to school, I had to commute to school on a bus that came in the morning at 6 o'clock, picked us up from the county road, and picked up everybody else, throughout the Manuelito community, stretched on into the west side of Gallup. And that took us to about 7:45 till we got to school. And then getting out of school was the same routine, getting out at 3 o'clock and getting home at about 5:30. And, just trying to make the best of our living situation. My grandfather was a rancher as well. a farmer, and he himself was a silversmith, and he was also a carpenter. So a lot of individuals that live in our community had their homes built with his help. And a lot of that just basically went to cultivation. So I always like to say that a lot of the messages that we get when we're growing up, they begin with our grandparents. Unfortunately, I was able to experience that with having them help raise me and go through that process of sharing their culture, their heritage, their language, and their understanding of everyday living back then, and how, you know, I intermix that with everything that I do here now with myself.
So you mentioned that your grandparents were silversmiths, and I know that you helped them a lot with that. And that was probably, I am assuming, one of your first experiences regarding entrepreneurship was helping them with the silversmiths. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that experience and how you helped them with their silversmith business.
Okay. So my grandparents only spoke Navajo. That was one of the biggest, I think, obstacles for them from the get, and the journey of, you know, me coming along and my story. I tell everybody all the time that being in the community that we're in, it's difficult for people to understand how diverse the Navajo communities are, specifically because of that language barrier. My grandparents were very skilled silversmiths. They were really good at cast work, overlay, stamp work. They were known for their concho belts, you know, their authenticity with the designs and the patterns that they had. My grandmother had a lot of Navajo, Hopi, and intermixed designs that she had. So we had a lot of these traders that were local that would make orders from them. And the communication process was just them writing down how many pairs of earrings, rings, bracelets, belts, you know, whatever it was that they needed, and just, you know, kind of giving an idea of a pattern and whatnot, having to write it down on a piece of paper, and then, you know, giving it back to my grandparents previous to that, and then them having their own children convey that message of, you know, what does this say? What does this mean on the piece of paper? But it was also a bartering system. You know, a lot of the times the only way that they were able to sell their jewelry was by going back into Gallup. And we know that there's a lot of local traders that are in Gallup. And at that time, it was always a negotiation process. It's very difficult making any type of jewelry. You know, anybody that's out there that's an entrepreneur or is a silversmith can echo that same message, that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work when you're an artisan, coming down to the process of, you know, creating that work, and how consuming it is, and the physical labor that goes into making those items that you're selling. So, you know, we would go into Gallup once that task was completed, and market these items. And my grandparents, from a very young age, would rely on me to go to Gallup with them, basically as a translator and the negotiator for what we were getting ready to market. So the process was always a long process. You know, it'd take about a week, 2 weeks to finish any orders that we had, depending on whether or not it was cast items. If it was overlay, needed stamp work, then, you know, they would commission me to turn around and help with filing, buffing, pairing earrings, you know, help setting stones, help fixing the bezels, sorting everything, just anything that they needed help with. So you call it free labor. So I started pretty young age. I'm going to say I was probably like 5 or 6, doing simple tasks such as helping buff. They would just give you, you know, the layout for everything, and give you your sanding paper and everything, and tell you as soon as they were done overlaying and cutting and doing what they needed to do, you were responsible for making sure that those imperfections and the light lines and grooves that you've seen on the earrings or the rings or anything were not visible to the naked eye. So doing a lot of that, and then helping with the stamp work, blackening the jewelry, buffing, like I said, you know, and just running back and forth and being their extra helping hand. So it's pretty interesting. A lot of that was very timely, like I said, and then going back into Gallup was just a lot of in and outs of those local stores that were there, and just communicating with these traders that were there. Majority of them were not from the community as well, but it was a very big market, as it is now. Native American jewelry in Gallup. Gallup's known for their jewelry stores. You have a lot of people that are there that purchase jewelry and resell it. and the wholesale is what they buy it for. So one of the struggles that we saw was just, it wasn't a fair market. You know, there was a lot of work that went into it. Anybody that purchases silver can tell you that it is very consuming. And a lot of the times the negotiation process was difficult for us, being that my grandparents, once again, like I said, were Native American, Navajo speaking only. They would go to these areas, and that's where I came in and learning to have a very assertive approach to these conversations and letting people know, you know, no, we need to sell these earrings at $17, $18, $19 a pair in order for us to make a profit. Not only just for the silver, but for the amount of work that went into that. I mean, and commuting to Gallup as far as fuel goes and everything else that we had to consider as far as trying to make a commission. So it's a little bit about that.
What was it? Because I know you've mentioned the trade economy. Sometimes it's really hard to barter, and then sometimes you're selling for not like truly a fair price. What would you say, like, any needs or barriers regarding that that you experienced helping with your grandparents, and also that you see today? Like, are there any changes that you think would help make entrepreneurship, and especially particularly for artisans and silversmiths, more accessible or more, I guess you could say, equitable? What do you like? What's your experience with that, and what do you think might need to be changed?
I still see this same process now, as far as seeing these silversmiths that are very artistic. They're one of a kind pieces that you'll see go anywhere. They come from the Navajo, the Zuni community. They come from all over to the Gallup area to sell their work. And one of the things that I see that is most common for me is there's an aggressive buyer's approach. And this is everywhere you go. This is anybody that has ever bought Native American jewelry, because I can't specify how much I see this and how much I personally have experienced this within my own journey as far as, you know, selling jewelry. Anytime you go in anywhere to one of these traders, locally and not locally, it's always a battle of what they think the value of your item is, right? To you yourself, you know how much work, how much time went into that, how much authenticity, not to mention the rising cost of silver. It fluctuates, everything fluctuates, and you could buy that silver in a market where it's high, and then the next week that price drops. But anytime you go into, you know, sell your jewelry when it is with a trader, as opposed to, you know, going to sell it on your own for your, you know, a higher price, it's difficult. There's always that bartering. And I've always seen that aggressive approach, like I said, of where you go somewhere and you tell them, hey, this is what I'm selling it for. And it's like, no, we don't want that. We want to pay you this much, but we're going to take all of it. And it was always a tug of war with me. And that's what I saw with, you know, with my grandparents. Was we had individuals that knew that they needed the item, but didn't want to pay the price that we were asking. And there were times where I see my grandparents just stand there for, you know, well over 30 minutes, just trying to barter with them and tell them, hey, you know, it's a lot of work. And so to kind of nip that in the bud at a young age, I would go in, I would just tell my grandparents, stay in the vehicle, you know, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go in, and I would walk in with my selling tray full of jewelry. And I would have this very stern, stoic look, which earned me the name Natani Yuj. And in Navajo, that means, you know, like little boss lady. So I would go in and I would, you know, put that tray up there. They would look at what I had and say, hey, we're going to take all of them, but we're only going to pay you $14 a pair, you know? And I'm like, that's not what we're asking. We need, you know, right off the bat, I'm starting with a high price. I'm like, we need $20. And they're like, that's too much. And I'm like, but you didn't do the work, you know? So it was back and forth. It was just, go ask your grandma. I said, no, I'm not. No, I'm not going back out there to ask her, because I know how long it took us, and it's a lot of work. And if you don't want it, we could go right up the road, you know, and they'd be like, no, we need them. But she always sells it to us for this price. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. We're not making any money. That's what I'm telling you, is we're not making any money, and we need to sell it for this price. And I would just pretty much get the train, tell them, no, I'm going. And they would be standing there kind of like at a tug of war with you. Like, no, we're not, or try to hand you a check for an amount that wasn't what you wanted. And this is a practice that still happens to this day, to where people don't want to pay that price, but yet one of the main things that we see is that there is a lot of value to the jewelry that's out there that is on the market. Something simple that I've seen even working for these same traders when I was younger during like the summers and whatnot, as I got older, was that the authenticity of that art is such a need. And it's not just on our own areas, but overseas. You have people that will come from Ireland, they'll come from, China, they'll come from wherever to come to Gallup, New Mexico to purchase jewelry because of the authenticity. And a simple bracelet that they bought for maybe $20, $30, they could mark up and resell in American dollars for like $800, $900, upwards of $1,500. And that need is there. You see it. I've seen a pair of earrings that I purchased locally from an artisan. At that time, silver prices for $40 recently at a powwow that somebody else was selling for $380. So I'm like, wow, that markup is high, and they're beautiful. The jewelry is beautiful from all of these artisans across, Indian country. We see that authenticity is there, but we don't get that value. We don't get that value when we're out there selling our items. And it's not just a personal experience that I have. This is a message that I know can be echoed by so many artisans that are out there. And the very few that are able to gravitate out of that silo of being, undervalued, they blossom. They make so much as far as not even just being successful with sales, it's being successful with, having their own item and having that integrity to say that they're online, that they've been featured in a magazine, they've been featured, at an arts market or something like that. And that was only because they were able to navigate through what modern technology is and how it has advanced and scaled their abilities. So then versus now, we still struggle with that. We have a lot of elderlies in our community that have that comprehension barrier as to, what is social media? They don't even really know how to use a smartphone. A lot of them are still using those older phones that we see a lot in our communities, are subsidized phones. And these communities that surround us don't have access to Wi-Fi. They don't even have access to electric still, with some of them and whatnot. So we see a lot of that. Majority of the individuals that I've spoke with recently that I've talked to, like at these swap meets, they don't know how to scale their items, and they're beautiful. It's just, they're elderly, like I said, and it's just a good old handshake and cash in hand is good for them, as opposed to knowing yourself, how you could scale that sale for them and help them be a little bit more successful by them being on social media, or the idea with the Gallup Arts, having them consign the item as opposed to having to sell it for less to a trader that's not willing to value your work at what we know they'll make $200-$300 profit off of.
From what you've told me and what you just mentioned, I feel like there's a huge opportunity for artisans to kind of move away from that trade economy model and start their own businesses online, selling at swap meets, and then maybe scaling, but what do you think would need to happen in your community to make that kind of more of a possibility for people? And I know you've been doing a lot of work through our program, like doing outreach and just telling people about the different opportunities available to them. But like what do you see needing to happen in order to make that like a true reality for not just a select few, but for the entire community of artisans in your area?
I think one of the main approaches needs to be that individuals have to remember that we're coming from a community that is still trying to comprehend change. We're still trying to grasp to a simple understanding of a lot of things that were not brought with the educational approach, with the understanding of how society continues to move along. we fail to remember that our elders are still not able, like again, I said, they don't know how to use a smartphone. They don't know how to use the internet. A lot of them are still struggling with trying to understand what's a checking account, what's a savings account, why do I need to keep my money in the bank? Why do I need to do these things? We still have a lot of that. And it's not just our elderly, but it's also our youth and our mid-age individuals that are not understanding the whole process of a business and how to run a business and how it should or need to go, not just for their simple understanding, but for banking purposes, for tax filing purposes, things like that. There's so much that still needs to happen, and that comes through education. A lot of the times individuals don't understand. And there's a lady that I was working with recently when I was in banking that, was from a local pueblo that made a lot of pottery. She didn't understand why she was basically putting everything into her regular checking account, and she was receiving fixed income. And she ran into a situation of where they were like, okay, well, you have income and it's showing on your bank statement, but you're not providing proof for that income. Like, what's going on? So I had to sit down with her and I told her, I said, hey, you know what? There's a simple solution for that. She came in stressed out. She's like, I don't know what to do. Because I just put everything in my checking account. All I know is that when somebody writes me a check for, the pottery that I get done doing, I just deposit it. That's all they know. They don't know that they have to have a business account or that they need an EIN, right? Sole proprietorship was what I suggested to her because her business is so small and, it's far and in between that she gets these large orders. So what we did is just sit down with her, give her the education, but don't just tell her what needs to be done. We need to be sitting down with them and we need to help them. We got to understand that as, it's our due diligence in our communities to make sure that we're successful. And talking about change is very easy, but being a part of that process is the more impactful portion of everything that we're doing, especially as liaisons. And not just liaisons, but, in all the other sectors, such as SBA or, banks, they want to see success, but the only way to drive that success is to extend that invitation of a helping hand, not just by saying, here, go online. We have online banking resources. We have online services. You're already dealing with a very fragile community that is still trying to grasp to technology. So, with this individual, like I said, she wasn't Navajo speaking. She was from a whole different community, but sitting down with her, taking 2 minutes at tops to create that EIN number, printing that information for her, giving her a little manila folder, putting that information in there for her and saying, okay, this is your EIN number. This is your new business checking account information. We're going to start depositing all that in here so that we're able to separate these transactions. She's like, oh, I didn't know it was that easy. Thank you. Thank you for all your help, and it's just basically leaving that ladder down. We come into these areas as, the givers, the doers, the movers, and the shakers, and it takes a lot of understanding and empathy as far as helping in order to make sure that these community members and communities thrive.
You touched on it a little bit, your banking background, and the work that you do with financial literacy, but I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through the journey that got you into the banking business and then into financial literacy, starting off with the work that you did selling at swap meets, and then like how did you get from there to the financial world and then to what you're doing now?
Okay, so a little breakdown of my past. Growing up, I've always said it, and I say it even now, and I knew then, everybody has that entrepreneur spirit. Growing up, there's something that you're good at, and there's something that you've been taught that is of value that you bring to the table. And if not, then you always will seek something if you want success, right? We go after what we want and we seek that success however we have to attain it. At a very young age, I was shown those footsteps of entrepreneurship, and going more into life, I had my children rather young, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be with them the way that I wanted to, unless I, was successful in being able to still make money, but being at home. So at that point, when I was about 18, I started going online and looking for novelties and ordering these novelties and going to local swap meets, going to carnivals that were throughout the Navajo Nation, local events that were hosted in Gallup and the surrounding communities, and just set up with these novelty items. And that was able to bring me in a steady income. And at that point is when I applied for my first EIN. And I just got myself a simple checking account with the local credit union. The ladies that were there over at First American Credit Union, which it was local, very friendly, very insightful. And, they sat down with me. They helped me with everything that I needed, helped me open my checking account, my business account. And it started from there. And then moving back into the city, I took a position with a finance company as an assistant manager. So when I took that position, it kind of gave me an idea about finances and whatnot. It was a lot of lending. From there, I migrated to social work. Social work then took me back to working with community members, where I saw a very huge need for resources in our communities. That huge need, once again, went back to individuals that weren't really able to understand what a budget was, how, finances worked, and how a lot of this was impacting their stability. A lot of the times I seen, individuals that just really didn't understand a lot of what was going on around them. And it was just bringing the resources to them. Once again, bringing that resources and education to them. I worked in that field, and that kind of catapulted me back to me putting my information online, was all it was, putting my resume online. And the family service unit that I was working with, that social service, was dissolving into another program that I really didn't want to, migrate into. So I got an extension to become a banker with a local bank. I took that position, and within a month, migrated from being a tier 4 teller to a business development banker. They saw the communication and the ethic that I had, and the fact that I knew a lot of these local business owners that were in the community, basically through my grandparents and our silversmithing and whatnot. So I took that position and learned a lot along the way, as far as what the business sector of banking was, how everything worked, what types of accounts were there, transfers, any and everything that went along with the business sector of things. So just learning along the way, meeting awesome individuals such as the SBA, local Gallup SBAs. I'm trying to think of her name. You know her name. What was her name?
Cindy Jarvison.
Cindy Jarvison. Yeah, she's so awesome and amazing. I used to work a lot with her. I met her through at the SBA. She would refer a lot of the clients that they had over there to me for their banking needs and whatnot, and work a lot as far as like lending. If she wasn't able to help anybody, she would then, refer them to me and see what we could do, because we were a private bank. We were not a big name bank. So a lot of the times, if we ran into situations as far as lending, we were able to narrow down a lot more and be more flexible as far as our lending services. Yeah.
So because we've talked about this a lot, and you've mentioned that people have told you, like, why don't you just leave your small community and go to the big city where you could, quote unquote, be more successful. But I do feel like you have been successful, and you will continue to be successful in your community. So I'm wondering if you can just share with us that motivation of why you choose to stay and serve your community, and kind of what your hopes are for your community when it comes to the work you do with financial literacy training, and then also the work as a tribal liaison for the New Mexico Entrepreneurship Enhancement program.
Okay. So I guess a lot of that, it's going to go back to how people measure their success, right? Everybody has a metrics for how that works for them. Once again, based off of where you're living, I think in a lot of senses, this is one conversation that I have very often with people that have a tendency to tell me to leave. Is just that I don't measure my success based off of a dollar amount. You cannot measure your success off of that. in the community that I live in the community that I grew up in the society that I'm in, my culture, my heritage, we measure our success based off of what we value and our heritage and, you know, our culture. That's what success is. And in order for me to be successful, I want to see my community members be successful. And the only way that that's going to happen is if I impact that change. And a lot of that goes back to the conversations that we've had about, you know, it would be, yes, easier to go to a larger city, do the work that I'm doing, scale that, and put my past behind me, but I wouldn't feel happy, you know, like, and a lot of it is only because our community is underserved, it's underbanked. There's a lot of deficits that we face in our communities across Indian country. We don't have a lot of awareness. There's a lot of people that are out there that bring a lot to the table. There's not even just for the outside community, but in our communities. There's a lot of needs that we have. And these entrepreneurs that live in these communities are the ones that fill those needs, right? Well, once again, it goes back to culture. Like I said, we're getting ready for a kinalta, which is a rite of passage for our daughters. And we need certain items. We need stir sticks. We need, you know, corn. We need a grinder. We need all of these different items to prepare. A lot of the times we want a butcher. And that goes back to, you know, who are the cultivators in our communities? These are the individuals that actually go out and they cultivate, they go out and they make those stir sticks, because it takes time to, you know, prepare that, get a piece of wood, grind it down, cradle boards. They're out there looking for cedar or whatever wood the individual orders a cradle board from, sanding it down, having that artistic touch to be able to bring these items to your own communities. And we thrive off of that. There's so many things that we have in our own communities that are specific for us that we need. And it takes these entrepreneurs and cultivators in our communities to make those items. And that's how we thrive as a community. And to scale that and be better, it's just simple education. It's me leaving the ladder down and staying in my community and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to impact that change by doing the financial literacy courses for the Navajo Tribal Housing Authority, and for doing it for people on and off the Navajo Nation. I say Indian country because I tell everybody I'm going to serve any and everybody across Indian country as far as I can reach them, and as long as they have access to Zoom. And even to the extent of self-teaching, you know, there's a lot of things that I've learned along the way, as far as, you know, the court systems, the banking, lending, and resources that are out in the community. And one of the biggest things that I'll say right now is the only way that I can be successful and measure my own personal success is by continuing to assist those in my community to grow and thrive there as well. Because I love where I live. I love where I'm at. And I could go to California and then not be happy because I don't have a backyard. I'm not able to see my horses or cattle, or just take a drive down to Manuelito and just enjoy the open space, you know, and not having to hear a train or a truck go by, or the loud hustle and bustle of a city, and just taking in the elements. That's what we know. That's what we're taught. That's how I grew up, you know, as a community member, and just knowing and seeing that we have a beautiful community. There's a lot of beauty in our culture and our heritage and our practices and everything that we do, that it would be a shame to not see that success, but impacting that success by educating those in our community to make sure that we're able to migrate to how society is expecting things to go.
So I have one last question, and then I'll open it up to others if they want to ask. But as far as like the needs and barriers and like those deficits that you mentioned go, what would you like to see organizations like UNM Rainforest Innovations and others like us do to help maybe mitigate some of those barriers, or just help continue to support? Like, what do you see the biggest needs are right now in your community and with the people that you talk with and work with on a daily basis?
I think that right now UNM has done a really good job as far as ensuring that we have tribal members from our community, such as the tribal liaisons, myself and our other 3 on the TEEP team, and making sure that we're able to bring that message to the Navajo Nation's economic development, the president's office, and just individuals that we know personally through Indian country to make sure that there's awareness. What I think we could do better at, though, is having an ecosystem that's open that we're able to refer people to, just to be able to sit down with them and have that access, not only just for the individual helping them, but for the individual that's being helped, to where there's, okay, a little office area where we could sit down and say, hey, you know what, there's a printer, there's a computer, we have access to the internet. What do we need to get done? And are there marketing materials that we could use on the spot, or what we can help them, kind of pitch something to somebody that has that ability? Just an ecosystem of where they can go that's local to them, that we could actually sit down, introduce them to those ideas, and give them a visual. A lot of times people learn different. Sitting down with them and talking to them, showing them, and also helping them. We can impact that change at such a great number if we just did a little bit better at making sure that that ecosystem was there, and that we were just all, holding hands and making sure that it's a tight knit community, and making sure that we're strong bonded in that, instead of, like again said once again, was just breaking these silos of, well, that's their job, this is their job. Let's get on a common ground and impact that change by just making sure that we're able to help each other.